Kate.
And I'm Sarah.
We work at Walden Behavioral Care, and we just want to talk a little bit about the way in which the upcoming holidays can lead to lots of stress and certainly can contribute to binge eating, emotional eating, overeating in general. So, Sarah, what do you think are some of the ways in which this time of the year can bring up certain types of emotions like stress?
Oh my God, so many things. So the first thing I think of, especially with the individuals that we deal with, is food. Food is everywhere at this point in time in the year. So not only is there food, but then in terms of other stressful situations, family is typically around, maybe individuals that they don't typically see on a day-to-day basis, might bring up conflict or something like that. And then there's also just other things in day-to-day life that can be just compounded in terms of stress. Like you've got work to manage, kids to manage, school to manage, and now also there's the holidays.
Right. You know, sometimes if you work, the end of the budget year can be, there can be a big push with responsibility there, or if you're in school, you know, finals, you know, certainly this time of year brings up a lot for lots of different people. So, you know, when we think about helping people, you know, recognize the stress that they're going through, what are some of the things that, you know, you would say we typically identify stress by? How do we know when we're having that emotion?
Yeah, so it might look different to different people, but for some people they might be a little bit more irritable. They might go towards things that are not necessarily helpful, like overeating or turning to food in order to comfort themselves. They might seek to avoid other people as well, isolate a little bit in order to avoid some of that stress with other people. It varies, really.
Yeah. You know, and I think that sometimes it can be hard for us to even recognize that we're stressed in the first place. Sometimes you don't really know until you have maybe turned to food or had an overeating or binge eating, you know, episode. That definitely happens. It's really common. So, you know, I think that one of the ways that we think can be very helpful in terms of preventing some of the overeating or binge eating episodes is actually managing stress ahead of time, and to the best extent that you can, doing some planning around that. So we had talked a little bit about some of the best ways of planning. Can you talk a little bit more about what we were discussing with regard to self-care and this idea that self-care is so important?
It really is so important. It's easy to get kind of wrapped up in these holidays with other people and other people's problems, and then to neglect our own things that are going on. So making sure that you take some time and actually schedule out some time for yourself where you can implement self-care. And that's going to look different from person to person, but really finding out what kind of brings you back to center, brings you back to feeling more like yourself again. It could be taking a nice warm bath, or really settling down with a cup of coffee and a good book. Something that kind of gives you a brief reprieve from kind of the hectic craziness that the holidays can bring.
Yeah, and I think it can be hard to find the time for that, and yet it may be that at this time of the year it's more important than ever that you make the time to do more self-care activities. So how is it that we can sort of help people think about managing some of those difficult social interactions with family, with friends, these things that will come up, you know, sometimes around meals or gatherings?
So the biggest thing that I always get to is how do I introduce myself? How do I talk about myself to all these people where maybe you haven't seen them in a year or 6 months or something like that. So kind of planning around how you can present the last 6 months for yourself, the last year or so, and what you feel actually comfortable talking about with others is something really, really important to go into the situation with. Also knowing the audience, so who are you going to be interacting with? Is it your family? Is it your coworkers? What's appropriate in those times? And what do people want to know about you? Do they want to know about your kids or your work projects, and kind of figuring that out for yourself too?
Yeah, and I think that at the same time, Sometimes there are those people in your life who you know are going to ask you questions about things that cause more stress or make you feel more uncomfortable. And I would advise also planning for those types of interactions. What are you going to say when that uncle asks that question that is hard for you to answer, that you don't really feel like answering or sharing? There are lots of situations like that where you can sort of change the subject, ask them a question back, give a one-word quick answer, and then move things right along. And if you plan for that ahead of time, you're going to be in a much better position to manage it when it comes around.
That can be really great in order to avoid conflict as well, which there might be some people in your family who are just looking out for a little excitement, maybe a little bit of fighting. And so being able to say your piece and then kind of remove yourself from that is important too.
I think with regard to removing yourself, one thing that I think is going to be a major way of managing stress in the moment, is taking breaks. And we can't really say enough about just giving yourself. It could be 2 minutes, it could be 10 minutes, but taking some time away from other people, just being on your own, to take some deep breaths. Maybe if you're able to step outside and breathe in the fresh air, that can be helpful. Or you might just have to kind of step into a bathroom and splash some water on your face or do some breathing there. And that's okay. I think makes sense that you're going to potentially need some breaks, and taking time to manage stress in the midst of a difficult situation is going to be really helpful in preventing the types of behaviors like overeating or binge eating.
And also finding the people that you can turn to. Maybe not taking a break might be helpful in one situation, and turning to somebody else who really understands what you're going through, or that you can kind of talk through whatever you're feeling in the moment in order to get some support would be really beneficial.
Yeah. And I think that sometimes you have people in your life who know a little bit about what you're going through, or know a little bit about what's hard for you. And I think that person who's going to support you, it might not even be someone who knows all the details of what it is that you're going through or what you're struggling with. They can still be a person that you sort of turn to chat with, or to talk with, or to just step aside if you need to in a difficult moment.
For some, kind of planning that in advance would also be really helpful, or even just giving a forewarning to that person, like, hey, if I need something, I'm just going to grab you, so that at least they're prepared for it as well, and they can also do the same for you. If they're needing support, they're needing some time to be able to actually do that. One of the most important things to kind of just keep ourselves as managing stress as best as we possibly can is our own expectations of what are going to happen and what actually do happen, and how those can be just so different. But at the same time, we need to provide ourselves with some self-compassion and be gentle on us, because ultimately no matter what happens, and we can learn from that, but either way we have to move on. And it's another time of the year, and it'll eventually slow down, hopefully, over time, and then we can kind of get back on track after the season.
Yeah, I really agree. We know that this time of year can just be very difficult for someone who struggles with binge eating, overeating, compulsive eating, food addiction. These kinds of things can get really stirred up. And that's okay. It's good to know that about yourself. And I think that some of the ideas that we just talked about could be very helpful to you to help manage some of that stress, both going into the holidays and then in those difficult moments. But it's important to know that Walden is here to help you if you need some extra help during the holidays. So please don't hesitate to reach out.